What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Retro YuGiOh, and today we're going to be looking at post Age of Overlords, the format ahead with a new set. Age of Overlord introduces new cards such as SP Little Knight, the Dear Bellstar engines, and the Horus cards as well. So they changed the format over a little bit. We're going to look into that. Let's get started. But remember, before we do, remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. Help support the channel at no cost to you. Alright, thank you. Let's go. So, here are our deck lists. Here are our tiers. Let's just review the tiers as always. So let's start. Tier 1. These are the decks you're probably going to see do really well at the premier event level. So your YCSs, your WCQs, even your regional level. Looking to the finals of every one of those events, more than likely you will see a deck from this tier. Tier 2. These are the decks which you expect to see at the top cut level of every these premier events, having success at the regional level, but generally won't be winning these events because they're not as competitive with the decks ahead of them. Tier 3, your rogue, essentially doing well at your locals and regional level, but not really having success at the premier level event like YCSs and WCQs. And then you've got rogue, which are probably, if at all, having any results, probably locals, and maybe just barely having occasional top cuts at regionals. But let's get started. So starting things off, we'll go to Rogue with Adventure, Synchron, or just Synchron decks in general. Now this is a great combo deck. It has an extremely high ceiling, and pretty much if you resolve full combo, you will probably win that game, hands down. The problem is how you get to that combo. This deck requires you to play a lot of bricks, and over the course of a long tournament, you seeing those bricks probably won't work out for you too well. In addition, the deck really hasn't had any top cut results at all, so put that into account. We're just going to leave this at Rogue. We're also going to put into Rogue Poltergeist, the Doug Zeef special. This deck has had no real results or representation, even after the new support in Duelist Nexus. It really hasn't done any better, and of course there are other better trap decks available in the format. So Poltergeist at Rogue level. Next we go to Pure Branded. Pure Branded, again, it has the same issue. Almost every deck should be playing Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs. Ash Blossom is just one of those things that really hurts this deck, as well as just the fact that it's very one-dimensional and easy to beat. There is a better version of this, which we're going to see right now in Branded Chimera. The Branded Chimera cards, they use the Branded engine as a supplement to start as a starter. It's not mandatory that they must resolve this, but if they do, fine. However, Branded Chimera can do stuff with Mirror Sword Knight, Kotal. They can rip a card out of your hand with the Chimera. They're just a very, very powerful deck that has many interruptions, their own turn and your opponent's turn. They have monster interactions and negations with Mirror Sword Knight. The illusion monsters themselves can't be destroyed by battle. So overall, very powerful competitive deck. Probably not as good as the decks above it, but still capable of winning, and probably has very good success in the format. The reason it's not tier 1 is because, again, being that one-dimensional deck threat it is, stuff like Dimensional Barrier could be quite impactful. Dark World. I'm going to put Dark World at tier 3. I feel like its borderline could be tier 2, but for now we're going to put tier 3, and I think it more so depends on how the format evolves. Do we see a lot of draw and lockbirds in the format? If we do, then Dark World definitely has to be in tier 3. If not, Dark World has the ability to go up to tier 2. Stuff like Ceruli Silver hand loop still exists. People may not be too prepared for that, although there's some other decks that will be in tier 1 that may also just force this deck to be a little bit not as dominant in the format if people have overlap versus other matchups. So for now, I want to put Dark World here. However, Dark World has the ability to go to tier 2, just never to tier 1. But who knows, Jen and Ken, the new support from Age of Overlord, could make this deck a bit better. Dragon Link. Dragon Link is still a very powerful deck. While it doesn't really gain too much from Age of Overlord, it doesn't change too much. The combos that itself has the ceiling, even after the ban list, it still has the same ceiling. It's just a little bit weaker in the consistency. So it's still a staple of tier 2. Exosister, solid tier 3 deck. Not much more to say. Yeah, they can play Shifter. That's a really powerful thing that this deck can do that not a lot of decks can. Again, every other deck really just feels like their engine itself is much more powerful than what Exosisters can do. And when your deck's engine can't really compete with the engines above it, that's something you've got to consider, so we'll leave it there. Floowandereeze is a solid tier 2 deck right now. It has a really good matchup versus Unchained, which is one of the better decks of the format. It can play Shifter, which gives it advantage against something like Tear Elements, which is popular right now. and just Dimension Shifter in general. If your deck can play that, your deck's probably got a place in the format. So I think Flu is pretty solid at tier 2, not quite good enough to be tier 1. Punk, Gold Pride, or Punk variants in general, we're going to put those as Rogue. They're just not very good at what they do. They don't compete well with the decks above them. Everyone's playing outs to say Punisher with Underworld Goddess or Herald of the Abyss because of Purely. So for now, we'll put this here. Maybe it can do something at the next level of events, but for now we'll leave it here. Heroes, this is again another Rogue deck. Heroes are going to be a fan favorite support of the casual players, so you'll probably see a lot of them at your local level. Maybe even your regional level you'll see a lot, but again, the deck overall itself, it doesn't do anything special. There's a lot of overlap with the best decks and counterplay to them that this deck actually just gets beat by them. Infernoble Knights, this is a solid tier 2 combo deck right now. Infernoble Knight itself is just a really, really oppressive deck. Much like the Adventure Synchro deck, where if you resolve full combo, this deck is disgusting, has multiple different ways of setting up negations. So, yeah, it's just a really oppressive deck. And if people don't play hand traps to beat this deck, you'll be in trouble. While it may not have the overall success a tier 2 deck does, I think it's a good sleeper pick, and once people realize how this deck actually functions, they might be surprised at how powerful it really is. Kashtira is solid tier 3. Kashtira itself, not that great right now. They don't have their Arise Heart, so they don't really have their end boss monster. However, all the Kashtira monsters themselves, they are still powerful, big, strong monsters on their own. So take that into account. Kashtira by itself still has capabilities to just be oppressive in themselves. Fenrir is a really powerful card. But overall, they don't really do anything too oppressive anymore, so we'll put them here. A first tier 1 deck. I believe Labyrinth will be tier 1. The new support they get from Age of Overlord gives them the ability to play on turn 1 or turn 0. If they have the right hand, there is a way to go Eradicator plus Lovely Lady Labyrinth on turn 0. A deck that can do that on turn 0. Now it's very unlikely, it's very difficult to get there, but they can do it. And if they have that in their pocket as a turn 0 play, it's not going to be good. Now how consistent it is, probably not very, but is it possible to do it just by playing the normal engine cards you would? Yes, so keep that in mind. Monadium gets a little bit of support from Age of Overlord, although I don't think the support it really gains changes the overall strategy too much. They could already do the Calamities lock right now. They already have the ability to set up an IP Apo with multiple negations and a counter trap play. Again, not really anything special that they could do now that they couldn't already do before, but they're a powerful combo deck with a counter trap negation. Very good combo deck. I don't know if it's going to be consistent enough to be tier 1. If this deck goes to tier 1, expect a lot of draw and lockbirds. And if we see a lot of draw and lockbirds, then this deck really folds to those. Marine Cess is a good rogue deck, but again, with everyone having an out to a Towers monster, probably not one of the better choices. Mathmech, again, a lot of the counterplay in the format to the better decks, Mathmech is already being countered by these, so it has overlap there. One circular, like, it's still okay. Like, the deck doesn't really do anything too powerful and too oppressive, but it's just Mathmech is Mathmech. I know Joshua Schmidt's probably loving this, but really, who cares? It's done nothing. Makanko, we're gonna put this in Rogue as well. I think it had a time and place where it was like having some success at tier 3, but if you know how to play against Mekankos, then you should be fine. Also, the top decks of the format really don't care too much about this. Next we have Purely, still a tier 1 deck. Still has a very consistent access to the draw 6 combo, and why that should change? Well, it shouldn't. So Purely, clear tier 1 deck, didn't get any worse. May not have gained any new support, but every other deck is not strong enough to beat Purely yet. Rescue Ace. With the Dear Bellstar stuff now, Rescue Ace is just a very consistent monster, giving very easy access to Abyss Dweller lines. It has very easy access to starters now, gaining access to Hydrant through the Bellstar cards. What can I say? It's more consistent to get your Turbulence set 4 play. That was the problem of Rescue Ace before. Doesn't have that issue anymore. Tier 1 deck. Expected this deck to be doing damage. Rika Sun Avalon. I really want to put this deck in tier 2, but I'm gonna say tier 3. And the reasoning for this is I don't think this deck is going to have consistent enough results outside of, say, in Europe, YCS. For whatever reason, this deck just always seems to be there, but everywhere else in the world, almost unheard of. Is it just because the Europeans haven't read the cards or just refuse to read the cards? I don't know. Let's just slow down on what we think of Rika Sun Avalon. Unless your name is Jess Robinson and you're tier 0. Runic builds, just probably pure Runic builds. I would say it's more like Rogue, probably. It's not that good. Just don't play pure runic, cross it with something. Solomon Grade is tier 3. It's been having some success on the regional level, which is kind of nice to see. Apparently still in 2023 we've got Solomon Grades doing well. But yeah, the new fire support from the what was it called? The Soul Burning Volcano Duelist pack, I believe it was called, or whatever it was called. That support's given this deck new life, and it's been having some success around locals and around regional level. Nothing more to say really. I don't think it should have results at premier level events, but it could. Who knows? The Sky Striker engine, we are past it now. This could come completely unlimited. The engine itself is just not powerful enough anymore. Like engage, search one, draw one. We're in a point in time where cards are just so powerful that draw a random card plus search one of the cards you need for your engine is just not that impactful anymore. Like the engine itself just does not compete. Sprite, I still think Sprite variants are going to be tier 3. They're still quite powerful, but just not in comparison to the better decks, so that's something to consider. Sword Soul, a fan favorite rogue deck here, so not much to say. Its overall engine just is not good enough versus top decks. Tier elements, since Arise Heart has been gone, this deck is now back to tier 1. It also has a very good matchup for some of the other top decks of the format, so that's really frustrating. Also, this feels like more of a gamble deck, but if you hit well, it's almost unstoppable. But sometimes they can just feast or famine it. Sometimes an Ash Blossom alone can stop them. Other times you can have everything but the shifter and they won't matter. They still beat you. Trap Trick's a good rogue deck. Nothing much to say here. It's had some regional results, but nothing significant. So we'll leave it here. Unchained. I still believe Unchained will be the best deck of the format. It does have a very difficult tier limit matchup. It has a pretty decent matchup against everything else. Like there's not really natural counters to this deck outside of say Dweller. And even so, Dweller's not that great. What I mean by Dweller's not so great is that 2 of the top 5 decks, or expected top 5 decks in my opinion, can play Dweller in Rescue Ace and tier limits. Pearly can't, Labyrinth can't, and the Mirror Match can't. So you should be fine if you know how to play this. It's more about the pilot than the actual deck. If you have a very successful pilot, Unchained is nearly unbeatable. If you have a subpar pilot, it'll be a very wide difference. Vanquish Soul. I wanted to put this down at tier 3 or Rogue, but considering it just had a result at the most recent YCS in Europe, I think it's more likely we put this deck here at tier 2. It did gain support from Age of Overlord, so that's something to consider right now. However, let's just see how well it does in future events. I don't think this deck is going to be here, but out of respect to what it's done and the new support it's getting, we're going to put it at tier 2. Horus, the new Horus cards, I think the cards as a standalone deck are tier 3, possibly even Rogue. I don't think they're very good by themselves. However, as an engine supplemented in other decks, I think this is going to be a very powerful thing. So expect to see Horus splashable in a lot of decks. Tier limits, I've already seen splashes in there. Expect to see a lot more. This deck is very powerful. And then the new Red Dragon deck. This has been surprising me. Tier 3. I didn't think this was going to be that great, but this deck has been showing up a lot. And we're probably going to see more of it. If you know the points of interaction, you need to stop either of the Soul Resonator or the, what is it called? The other Resonator one. It's the other one that comes in the structure deck. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but yeah. Just stop. If you stop those ones, you will be fine. That's the interaction point, which really you need to prevent. This deck has been surprisingly having a lot of good results. Capability to play a lot of Bestials, which are good to counter both Tier and Unchained. Also has points of interaction versus the Labyrinth decks. Can hurt purely. And the Rescue Ace deck can kind of struggle versus it. That's my opinion for the tier list. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Remember to like and subscribe. I'm YuGiOh. This is my tier list for post Age of Overlord format. And that's all. Bye.